I stood outside the dull green door at the end of the hospital corridor, the two bright lights above humming like angry insects. My sneakers made soft squeaks on the linoleum. There was a smell in the air, antiseptic, stale coffee, and something sharper that I tried not to name. My hands were shoved deep in my pockets, my violin case at my feet. From inside the room, I heard the short, clipped voices of my mother and aunt. They paused when they saw me enter, as if I were a ghost they hoped would pass them by. My father was asleep, or pretending to be, face turned to the humming machines beside his bed. He had sunk into the thin hospital mattress, his broad shoulders rising and falling beneath the rough sheet, mouth slack and slightly open. I looked at him, then at the silent disapproval hovering just outside his reach. My aunt spoke first. "You're back already." I nodded. I finished rehearsal early. She didn't bother to hide the frown. My mother, in her practical wool dress and scuffed shoes, pressed her lips together until they disappeared. She took the coffee cup from the bedside table and drank, her eyes never leaving the floor. Outside, the city of Rome sagged under a leaden sky. I'd biked here from the conservatory, my fingers stiff from hours on the strings. Every muscle in my arm ached. An argument was coming. I felt it, a dense cloud I had to walk through just to be in this room. "You know," my aunt said, rolling up her sleeves as if preparing for battle, "some boys your age already have jobs. Real jobs, their parents don't have to worry like us." I met her stare. "I have a job." "Oh, playing for pennies in squares, bringing home nothing." Her voice, nasal and sharp, cut into the hush. "How long will this go on?" My father stirred. I caught his gaze, a flicker of weariness, not anger, but he didn't speak. I pulled my jacket tighter. "I'm not playing for pennies. I've been telling you, there's an audition. Maestro Ravetto is coming to hear us next month, if I get in." "If," my mother snapped, sudden as a slap. "Always if, Luca. You know your cousin Gianni. He has a family and a flat of his own because he didn't waste years on childish dreams." My eyes burned. I kept my voice low and steady. "I'm not like Gianni." "That's right," my aunt said too quickly. "You could have been, though. If your head wasn't in the clouds." "I'm not in the clouds," I nearly shouted. I looked at my mother, searching for something softer in her face, but she only stared at the floor. "You've never been to one of my concerts. Why do you care so much?" My father started to say something, then coughed into his hand. "Basta," he muttered, but it was half-hearted, lost in the hum of the machines. My aunt shook her head, gathering her things. "You're young, you'll see. Dreams don't pay for medicine or keep the lights on. Your mother shouldn't be working at her age." "I'll help," I said, "I promise." "You've been promising that for years." She turned to my mother, who nodded. "Time to grow up, Luca. Rome is full of boys dreaming. Find something real." She ushered my mother from the room. On the way out, my mother's hand brushed my shoulder, but only for a heartbeat. Then she was gone, footsteps echoing down the corridor. For a long time, I stood beside my father's bed, violin case hanging at my side like dead weight. Outside, a siren wailed. I opened the window just a crack. The city's air, car exhaust, and distant rain breathed in on me. I closed my eyes, let the ache climb up my back. When I opened them again, my father was looking at me. "The others," he said softly, his voice rough with sleep, "don't hear what I hear. Sometimes I do when you play. Don't listen to them." I tried to answer, but something stuck in my throat. I just nodded and ran a finger along the lid of my violin case. The little latch on it was worn smooth by my thumb, a comfort I clung to in times like this. That night, as the city blinked awake with rain sparkling in headlights, I walked home alone through the winding alleys. Two schoolgirls swept past me under umbrellas, laughing about a football match. High above, laundry twisted on the lines and far-off vespers hummed through the wet streets. All around me, Rome bustled, indifferent. I ducked my head, gripping my violin like a talisman. I replayed the argument in my head, the disbelieving faces of my mother and aunt, their words slicing like glass, childish, penniless, hopeless. 1 block from my flat, I ducked under a stone archway and took out the violin. Not to play for coins this time, but because I needed to clear something out of my chest. The archway was silent but for the sound of water trickling from a broken drainpipe above. I closed my eyes and let the bow touch the strings. Batch the opening of the chaconne, the notes rose, defiant, trembling as if the whole world stopped to listen. I played for the stone walls, the dripping sound of rain, for my father's tired gaze and my mother's silence. My hands shook, but I did not stop. When the final note faded, I was cold but steady, resolve gathering where the pain had lived before. The next mornings blurred into each other. Sunrises tinted ochre over terracotta roofs, toast eaten standing up, quick sips of sweet coffee. I rehearsed at the conservatory so long my fingertips blistered, tearing open and healing over and over. My arms ached at night, forcing me to sleep on my back. Sometimes, after practice, I'd see my mother's friends in the market, catching sight of me in my battered jacket and offering the same thin, tight smiles as before. I knew they were talking about me, about my wasted years, about my family's shame. I ignored them. I closed myself off until there was only music, each clean note a step further along the path I set for myself. The day of the audition came and I thought I'd be sick. The old theatre on the Tiber was trembling with nerves, musicians in crisp suits clutching violins, cellists stretching their arms in the shadows, the bustle of 100 hopes. The panel sat in a row of red velvet chairs, nothing in their eyes but polite interest. Maestro Ravetto himself sat in the middle, immaculately dressed, his face a mask of practiced indifference. When my name was called, I walked onto the stage, heartbeat thundering behind my skin. My mouth was dry. I lowered my head, nodded to Ravetto, and lifted the violin. The music came as if someone else played through me. My hands stopped trembling, my bow was a blade. I played something of my own arrangement, a meditazione from Massenet but with an improvised cadenza. I thought of the hospital corridor, my mother's silence, the cold rain. When the last note hung in the air, the room was completely still. Ravetto looked up, his eyebrow arched, mouth crooked in something like a smile. He turned to the others and whispered for what felt like hours. Then he looked back at me. "Bravissimo, Signor Ferri, we'll be in touch." That night I didn't sleep. I lay in bed replaying every note, cursing myself for every imagined slip. I thought about my family. I wanted to see awe in their faces just once. A week later a letter arrived. Heavy cream paper, gold seal, my name inked in curling letters. I was in. Principal second violin, Orchestra Sinfonica di Roma. That was the year the city's doors opened to me. I played to fill the ancient halls of Palazzo di Musica, opened festivals with Ravel, soloed in front of audiences so hushed I heard my own breathing between the silences. I played in Vienna and Paris, festivals in Salzburg, polite after-parties in smoky apartments. There were years my days started before sunrise and ended when the city was asleep. My arms grew strong, my back straightened. I bought my own flat with windows looking over bright, busy streets. Sometimes I even laughed at the memory of my mother's worry, the scowl of my aunt, the sidelong glances in the market square. But I could not bring myself to go home. I sent money every month, left checks tucked under my father's pill bottles, paid the overdue bills without asking. Eventually the arguments died down, or maybe distance softened them, turned them to something quieter. Once on a rainy Tuesday I heard my name on the radio at a cafe near Piazza Navona. The newsreader's voice was clipped, professional. She listed the city's prizes, the musicians who had gone abroad, those who were coming home for the Sant'Angelo Gala. I bought more coffee than I could drink, dumped the receipt in a bin, and hurried away into the rain, feeling like I was being chased by the sound of my own name. Half a decade vanished in a breath. But every time I paused in the wings, violin in hand, I thought of that hospital corridor. The linoleum, the smell of bleach, the silence that choked the argument before it could fully bloom. The invitation came in the spring, hand-delivered to my flat, heavy with embossed gold. Maestro Ravetto's 40th season with the orchestra, a gala performance at Teatro Massimo, and beneath my own name printed in bold the words soloist. There would be a press conference after and a dinner. I would have a box for my family and friends, front row seats, a chance for me to show them, to let them see that none of it was wasted. I sent the tickets to my parents' address. I expected nothing. The wound was old, it didn't bleed, but it refused to heal. On the night of the gala, the city whirled with music. The Teatro Massimo stood radiant, marble columns bathed in warm light, fountains rippling in the plaza beyond. Guests in dark suits and glittering dresses swept up the red-carpeted stairs. Photographers flashed, their bulbs throwing everything into sharp white edges. Backstage, the orchestra tuned in low voices, the hum of anxiety as familiar as the feel of rosin in my hand. I adjusted my bow tie, smoothed my suit, and tried to remember how to breathe. Someone knocked on the green room door, a stagehand, young and nervous, shuffling his feet. "Signor Ferri, guests for you." "Family, I think." For a moment I thought it was some mistake, an old friend perhaps, but when I stepped into the corridor there they were, my father, thinner but upright, leaning on a cane, eyes shining. My mother, a new coat pressed and proper, but her hands twisting the ticket nervously. My aunt standing back a little, mouth tight but unspeaking. There was no argument tonight, no words at all, just a silence that pressed in on us. I smiled at them. My father put a hand on my shoulder, squeezed and nodded. My mother's eyes filled with tears. She blinked them away fiercely. "We'll be out front," my father said, his voice low but steady. I walked them to their seats. Rows and rows of velvet chandeliers hanging like launched spaceships, the names of donors and aristocrats whispered by the usherettes as the city's notables filed in. My family looked around, clearly out of place. For once, I didn't mind. Backstage, the orchestra was ready. Maestro Ravetto nodded to me. "Tonight's yours, Ferry, take your time." As I walked on stage, applause rolled over me, polite and scattered at first, then swelling as the spotlight followed me to center stage. I bowed, placed the violin to my chin, and searched for my family in the glare. They sat in the first row, faces upturned, expressions I couldn't read. Maestro raised his baton. The Tchaikovsky concerto began with a rush, the orchestra swelling beneath me. My fingers flew. Every phrase was a memory, hours in practice rooms, the shouts in the market, rain and stone, the desperate ache of wanting approval. The final cadenza, an eruption of brilliance, filled the hall. When I finished, there was only the soft wheeze of someone weeping in the dark. Silence held for a moment, then the applause. Thunderous, rolling up from the pit to the highest balconies, a storm that broke over me. Flowers landed at my feet, Maestro bowed. I saw my mother rise, hands covering her mouth, my father clapping, face flushed and proud. Even my aunt, never generous, wiped at her eyes. There was no mockery, no skepticism, only awe, a weightless kind that needed no words. After, at the reception, strangers pressed congratulatory hands into mine. My old teachers, classmates, girls from my street, all beaming as if I'd done what they had only dared to dream. My mother found me by the fountain, where glasses clinked and laughter spilled into the spring night. She looked me up and down as if searching for the boy who used to play long after bedtime. She touched my cheek. "I was wrong," she said, voice raw. "Forgive me." I smiled, pulling her close. My father joined us, his hand shaking as he lifted his own glass. "You showed them, Luca," he said quietly. "You showed us all." I spotted my aunt at the edge of the crowd, watching but not approaching. I crossed to her, offered my arm. For once she let herself be led, eyes shining. "Maybe it isn't so ridiculous," she whispered. "Not anymore." We stepped into the street as the city breathed, lights blinking in Riverwater, music echoing up to the stars. People passed, a shimmer of color and sound, and for the first time I felt no need to hurry or to hide. I was home, not as a disappointment, but as something rare. We walked together beneath the arches, my family pressed close, their silence not of judgment but fragile pride. Around us Rome gleamed, sun-warmed stone and rain-pooled cobbles, a city waiting for another song. That night, as I lay in bed, the window opened to let in the night air and distant notes of laughter, I thought of the long corridor in the hospital, the argument, the silence. None of it hurt now. Outside, the city was quiet, but I knew in my bones that my music had become part of its heartbeat. I had returned to them, changed, but still myself. A son, a dreamer, someone who had finally earned the right to stand where the applause was loudest, and to carry it home, into the silence I had always longed to fill.